provides a way for institutions to manage the problem case, the guests on their campus, the visitors who come for one day, to handle events like this for people who do not normally have EduRoam access, and to allow for delegated issuing of credentials. And so what we do is we use the Identity Federation to determine who you are and where you come from, and whether or not you are authorized to issue a visitor credential. So a secretary in a department at the University of Stellenbosch can log into the EVA system and issue a valid, globally usable EduRoam credential that can be issued to a visitor and that lasts 2 or 3 days. This is not a service we came up with. This is a service that the SURF NREN in the Netherlands came up with, but has since been adopted in many countries, including South Africa. And it's a fantastic example of how having Identity Federation starts to allow us to think a little bit outside the box. And that brings me to the second one on there, which is the Ntembeko Orchid Hub. So this is a service that we operate with our hat as an ORCID consortium. For those of you who are not aware, ORCID is the Open Researcher and Collaborator Identifier, and it's a way to create persistent identifiers for researchers that track their research outputs irrespective of which institution they're associated with. It's a globally unique persistent identifier for researchers. The ORCID Hub starts to allow institutions to manage ORCID records and specifically to allow researchers to self-assert affiliations with institutions. And I have a slide here showing a little bit about how that works. So Wesley Barry is a colleague of mine who specializes in the ORCID consortium. And what happens is we can use the Ntembeko ORCID Hub using federated login through our Sapphire Identity Federation. We know that Wesley is part of Tenet. We know, in fact, that Wesley is a staff member at Tenet. And we can allow him to self-assert that into his ORCID record, so to create a trusted record within ORCID. And the key thing, if you look at the left of that slide, that there are 2 employment records there in his ORCID ID. And the first one shows at the bottom the source as Wesley Barry. He provided that information himself. But the one at the top shows the source as Tenet. And that's what the Federation Hub has really allowed us to do, is to provide trusted information back into ORCID records based on the fact that we know where people are from and we know something about them. So again, this is being slowly adopted by institutions, universities, to make integration with ORCID that much simpler for them. The hub allows for a vast range of integration with ORCID. People can upload their publications, people can upload their conference papers and things like that, have them indexed in ORCID, but critically, that the source comes from their institution rather than being self-asserted. And that's a big part of adding value to ORCID. And again, this is not an idea that we came up with. It's an idea that came out of the New Zealand ORCID consortium. And we saw the possibility with it, and we started to offer some of our own development and collaboration in it to really customize it for South African needs and for our Identity Federation. So what are ITI's alternatives? Well, for a large part, a lot of these ideas are just simply not possible. There is got to be a source of trusted information to make this work. Things like EduRoam visitor access rely on a federation to create that trust. Without a federation, that service doesn't exist. In terms of some of the things like the CRIS systems, we could do that with direct integrations with institutions. We could do one-to-one direct integrations. We could talk LDAP to them. That really, really doesn't scale. That's fine when you have 2 or 3 institutions using it. When you have 100 institutions using it, managing those connections is a problem. And so this is a very, very clear example of how federation starts to unlock opportunities that didn't exist before it it happened, and to unlock collaboration between institutions that didn't exist. We see huge possibility in the development of shared infrastructure using federation as the source of authentication and authorization for that. And we're not alone in that. Globally, research collaborations exist. Research has long not been the purview of a single institution. Disciplines form discipline-specific groups that span institutions, that span countries. And those collaborations start to need to understand who they're dealing with. They start to need to understand what the trust relationship between the researcher that they're doing and the institution that they claim to be from is. And how do you scale that out into a big global environment in which I don't necessarily even know the name of your university, but I need to be able to trust it somehow. And that's the crux of the word trust in trust and identity. It's building those trust relationships between institutions that may not even know that they exist in countries across the world. The EduGain Interfederation, of which RIF is a member, spans around 60 countries now. And so that's an enormous trust network established across many, many countries that starts to make many of these research collaborations work more smoothly. So for Atai, our protagonist, as a researcher, this is an opportunity to participate in big global research in a way that's really simple. Just log in with your institutional credentials. We touch back to ORCID. ORCID facilitates the movement between institutions by providing Atai with a persistent identifier that spans her career as she moves from institution to institution, but still allows her to participate in these sorts of things. So on the slide there are 5 global research collaborations or global research infrastructure providers that we see commonly used in our federation. I know one of them is very important in Uganda. I'm looking at Lloyd down there because he sees NIH there. And he gets pressure from the NIH just as much as I do, probably more. But the very exciting one for me is the one on the right there, the African Open Science Platform. This is an attempt to build a sub-Saharan African continental open science platform. It's an initiative that is coming out of various countries and various organizations, including some funding out of the European Union. It's trying to build on some of the ideas that come out of the European Open Science Platform, and really to build research infrastructure in Africa for Africans. And a key part of that is going to be the trust relationships. In the white paper that they've just released on their vision for the African Open Science Platform, there is an entire chapter on the need for federation in Africa and improving federation in Africa to facilitate this sort of open science. And so a key lesson here for those of us who've been in the long game here is that the stuff we built some time ago is now starting to enable the bringing home of research into Africa in a way that has not been possible before. But let's get back to Atai. What are her alternatives if we don't have an in-country federation? Well, typically we look at identity providers of last resort. So that's just a nice way of saying I have to have somewhere to log in, and most of these platforms really don't want to maintain identity information, so they look to somebody else to do it. We have an attempt in Africa to build an identity provider of last resort, which is eduid.africa. That's a collaboration between the UbuntuNet Alliance, WACRN, and ASRAN, the 3 regional RENs, to build a platform for African researchers, and specifically for countries in Africa that don't have their own identity federations, to be able to still participate in these things. And those are a very important adjunct in the trust and identity space, because the alternative to that are the commercial single sign-on providers. which we may not entirely trust, or services run by governments that might have policy positions that are different to our own. And that's really why it's important that these sorts of trust and identity services are built by the research and education community for the research and education community. To put some perspective on this about where we came from in South Africa and what this means in South Africa, that's a very simple chart showing the number of authentications per year in our identity federation, in the Sapphire Identity Federation. You can see in 2019 it was less than 50,000 a year. We were building infrastructure and nobody was using it. In 2022, we're just short of 900,000 authentications a year. So in context, that's around 2,000 authentications a day or so. It's in the region of 1.5 authentications a minute. Okay? By Federation standards, that's still a very low number. In fact, by our own EduRoam standards, which processes 35 million authentications a year, that's a low number. But that sort of growth really starts to show the value of the services and the kind of exponential value as more people use it, so people say, start to see the benefit more. And so in my second last slide here, we have a breakdown of what those authentications are actually used for. So this is service providers. Most of these are not registered in our own identity federation. Most of these we learn through the global interfederation. And if you look at that slide, you will see the vast dominance of the library providers. And that's really because libraries serve undergraduate students, and there are a huge number of undergraduate students. So you can see the Science Direct, you can see Taylor and Francis, all the big names in the library space. But you can also start to see the other things that I've spoken about. Those are the student verification services. And you can see that they currently consume about 1/3 of all authentications that happen in our federation. A necessary evil. We can see some of the shared infrastructure that I was talking about, the Converus, ORCID kind of things. And we can also see some of the big research infrastructure, global research collaborations, including the NIH there. And I want to briefly pause there and say, this is a very skewed perspective of what trust and identity means, because you can see the dominance of the services that are used by the undergraduate students. They far dominate this. But I would argue that the single researcher logging into the NIH or logging into CERN is infinitely more important to a university than those undergraduates. What the undergraduates allow us to do is to make sure the infrastructure works, to make sure the infrastructure scales, to make sure that people know how it operates. If I am reliant only on the very small number of researchers who are using this, I don't know when it's broken. I would rather find out it's broken because an undergraduate failed to get their student discount than because a researcher failed to submit their publication on time. And so that paints a skewed perspective of the value of federation, and I think it's important to understand that skewed perspective. And so in closing, I'm going to come back to Itai. At the beginning, I said Itai's name meant do as you please. I've presented a South African perspective here. Uganda is not South Africa. There are lessons we can learn from each other, and indeed, this is an environment in which we must learn from each other. But you also need to do your own thing. Thank you.
Forgive the technology. Thank you so much, Guy. Before I open up questions to the audience, I have one question for you. How did you manage to get these commercial providers, Spotify and the likes, to work with you as the federation?
We didn't. They came to us. and that's actually really important. They understand the value of what we've built. They truly understand the value of what we build, because for them, student verification is costly. It's very, very costly for them to do. The federation reduces their costs, so there's commercial value to them. And that's why there's an elephant in that room, because they see the commercial benefit, and we don't derive any of that. We build the infrastructure that they use to make money, and we don't see any of the revenue. And that's really what in academia and Verified are trying to do. They're trying to bring some of that revenue back into the operators of those federations. But yeah, they came to us. The important thing is we didn't say no.
Interesting. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes? Okay, thank you so much. You can get the mic. Brian is moving towards you, so.
Thank you, Guy. My name is Douglas. I would like to know the exact steps that you're taking to bring back some of that revenue to you guys, the developers of the system.
Sure. So we're not right now. So I still see value in the student verification services simply in providing me a base load on our federation. I still see value in raising awareness. It's quite hard for an NREN or the operator of an identity federation to put pressure on institutions to join a federation. And I'm sure my Renu colleagues can understand this. There is nothing like students complaining to their IT staff about the fact that they can't get a student discount, but their colleagues from another, or their friends from another university can, to put pressure on an IT department to do the right thing. And so for me, the value is in creating that awareness and that pressure so that the single researcher in that institution who really, really needs the federation to do their research gets that opportunity. And so right now, I still see value in giving them a free ride. I don't believe I will always see that value. And certainly that's the experience of the colleagues in other federations in other countries, and they've started to push back quite strongly. And what they've done is they've built APIs into that service, and they sell commercial subscriptions into those APIs. And when I said we didn't say no, they've started to say no. They've started to say, you want to join our federation to do student verification? We don't do that, but here's a commercial offering that we provide with an API that you can pay for. And that starts to give revenue share. And in academia's model is really to give some of that revenue share back to the federation operators for whom that authentication is happening. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Someone with the mic, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to add a little bit of color to what Guy was saying just now. We do operate in academia, and it's not that easy to make a lot of money on authentications. We do a little bit better than breaking even. Everybody awake now? But that is not the only thing we care about. Yes, we do expect, we see a pretty steep ramp up. We make more and more money on it. As Guy was rightfully saying, we use that to fund our trust and identity development for now. We agreed that with the European NRENs, they see value in us doing that for them and to bring services like EduVPN, seamless access, etc., etc. But over time, it will probably do much better than just breaking even, and then we are planning to lower the subscription fees for our members, for example. There's one thing that I think is very important to add to this, and that is the whole aspect of privacy or privacy, depending which type of English you speak. One of the reasons that it is so hard to bring the likes of Spotify and Elsevier and all those kind of guys into our federations is that we don't want to sell out personal information about the students. So one thing that in academia does, from a technical point of view, it strips out all the information about the student and just says, yes, this is a student, or no, this is not a student. And we have found that not only does that protect the user information of the user, it also makes our life a lot easier, because we don't have need to get legal teams involved that look at the contracts we sign with them, because after all, we are not sharing personal data. So it's much easier for us to onboard commercial service providers than it used to be, and that in turn makes it possible to bring in service providers that, again, as Guy said, may not be of interest to us as NRENs, but are of interest to students, like discounts on pizzas or cheaper laptops, etc. And so there is more benefit to it than just generating income out of those services. And for us, it is, frankly speaking, not the main driver. We like to break even. We don't want to make a loss on giving commercial services access to us, but in the end, we care more about the privacy.
Thank you so much, class, for that submission.
Exactly as Klaus said, for us it's not the main driver either. The main driver for us is facilitating that researcher. It's just a means to an end, but it is the means to an end that an undergraduate student cares the most about.
Thank you. Yes, there is a hand here in front. Interesting.
Thank you, Guy. Mine is a question about the challenges with the federations in South Africa. And I'll put this in alignment with the current changes from the times of COVID. And this comes to like the compliance standards that are required by people like RIFEDS and EduGain. I'll give an example. At NIH, it's a requirement from September last year to have multi-factor authentication and many other things for you to access that library. And I think getting institutions ready worldwide to have this kind of compliance, it was really a very big task. And I'm not sure how many in Africa have actually done so, but you see, these are the kind of things that are changing. Our guest of honor talked of something called retooling. And I would imagine you have some challenges. Like, I mean, how are you trying to ensure institutions are compliant with the changing environment? And I know Renu has similar challenges. I'm glad Helen is next to you there. So I'd like to listen to your story. Thank you.
Sure. So this is a very, very rapidly moving space. And in fact, one of our challenges is keeping up with those developments, actually understanding them ourselves. We operate a very small team. Our trust and identity team consists of 3 people. And we do a lot of things. So one of our challenges is actually making sure we understand what's going on. That's not a dissimilar story, not even just in African federations, but across the world, that the resourcing for the trust and identity things is low compared to the value that they add. That comes very clearly out of the REFED surveys and things like that. So we're not alone in that problem, but it is a real problem for us. To more directly answer your question, we have a slight advantage here in that our federation architecture is different to Renu's federation architecture, and in fact different to the vast majority of the identity federations in the world. We took a very specific decision very early on in the life of our federation to build a hub and spoke federation. So for clarity, for those who are not aware, there are essentially two architectures for federation. One is a hub and spoke, which, as its name suggests, has a central point in which everything goes through. The other is a full mesh federation in which there is no single central point. It's very decentralized. There are strong arguments for the decentralized model, but for us in our environment when we did this, we realized we were going to see a challenge with the institutions. And so we very specifically adopted this hub and spoke architecture because it allowed us to relieve institutions of some of that burden. And so when we get to the sort of specific multi-factor authentication things that you're talking about, this has started to really pay off. We're seeing federations around the world introduce proxy elements into their federation, really to deal with these sorts of challenges. We've never had to do that because the proxy is always there. And what that's allowed us to do is do translation services even of the multi-factor authentication. So we have a dominance of ADFS and Azure identity providers in our federation. That's not an uncommon story. The Canadian Federation do that in a full mesh federation. It's much, much easier in the hub and spoke architecture. And what we've done is we've invested quite a lot of effort in understanding, for instance, Azure and ADFS's multi-factor authentication signaling and how that's compatible with the REFED's multi-factor signaling. And that means that institutions that are on that path, which is probably about 2/3 of our federation identity providers, can turn on multi-factor authentication in their existing infrastructure in the way that Microsoft wants them to. And in fact, many of them already have, and so this is a signaling problem. And we can do the signaling translation. So that's really eased this problem for many of our identity providers. What we see in other federations is people putting proxies in front to do exactly the same sort of things that we're doing in the hub. So how do you solve the Azure problem if you have a hub and spoke federation or you put a proxy in front of Azure, and that's a fairly common thing. So I think for us a key win is that a very early decision to try and centralize some of the technology has paid off, but that's always come at a cost to us. We have to build high availability architecture. We have to, it's a much easier decision to build a full mesh federation because there's less work for the federation operator. We took on a lot of work when we did that. If our federation hubs go down, the entire federation breaks, and so there's some cons to that approach as well. We just realized that the pros outweighed the cons in our context, and that goes to do what's right for you. That was right for us. It remains to be right for us.
Thank you. One more question? Two more. Okay, three more. We shall end with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy, for the nice presentation. And forgive my ignorance. I might need to seek a little bit of clarification. I would like to assume that by subscribing to EduRoam, I'm subscribing to Identity Federation. Is that true?
That's a hard question to answer because there are multiple answers to it. In the traditional model, no. So EduRoam is an identity federation. Those of us who work in the trust and identity space often refer to EduRoam as Federation Lite because it serves a very specific use case, the authentication on wireless, and it has a very, very limited subset in its answers. The answer to the question is just simply yes or no. Can I get access or can I not get access? And EduRoam is based on Radius. The more complicated answer is from the way the governance of our federation is structured. EduRoam is just a technology profile within our federation. And so specifically what I'm talking about in the Sapphire case is the other technology profile we operate, which is a SAML-based technology profile. That's web-based SSO rather than Radius, so it happens in a web browser. And the set of information that you get out of that federation is far richer than you get out of EduRoam. So rather than simply a yes or no answer, it's this is how this person is affiliated in the institution they come from. Oh, this is how the institution that they come from, this is how they're affiliated, this is what their name is, this is their email address, and we can send a rich set of attributes back to the service on which they can base authorization decisions, on which they can build profiles and things like that. Or we can send them nothing at all, which is what Klaas was referring to about the privacy. So we have complete control over what attributes get released. So it is and it isn't related, and just to complicate it more, we can now, because of recent developments, and specifically a development called Get EduRoam, we can use the SAML-based identity federation to issue credentials that work on EduRoam, but not the other way around. So it's a complicated answer to your question, but the very short answer is that they're independent.
Oh, great, thank you. More of like single sign-on in a way.
It's absolutely single sign-on. In fact, single sign-on is the right way to describe it.
Great. That answers quite other questions that I had, but I was asking myself, how do we promote going this direction, given the background where I come from in an institution? How can we promote getting to this level? Of course, selfishly, I'm interested in Spotify,
sure,
for example, and of course the research libraries that you've shared. How do we...
So I realize I'm talking to an ICT directors forum here. And the message I give differs depending on which forum I talk to. We have long found for us that librarians are key allies in the federation community, far more than the IT directors. And there is a very specific reason for that, which is if you look at who the beneficiaries of the service are, it's almost never the service staff of an institution. It's almost never the people working in the IT department. The librarians see the value far more than they do. So we've used the library path to put pressure on IT, which I'm now telling in an IT forum. I try not to tell our IT directors that, because then they get cross with me. And similarly, students. The issue is really an institutional priority question. It's what matters to your institution. The Spotify thing is, as I said, a means to an end for us. It's a way of putting pressure on an institution to do what is ultimately the right thing for their researchers. And that's because we're very aware that in many of our institutions, those researchers don't have a strong voice. They don't, when you have one researcher working on a global research collaboration in an institution, their ability to drive change in IT is quite small, and particularly in institutions that don't have a strong culture of e-research, they really have a hard time convincing institutions this is something you must invest time and effort and money in. But institutions tend to be very responsive to their libraries. Library directors hold a lot of clout in most universities. And they also tend to be very responsive to their students, and particularly in South Africa, our institutions are very responsive to students because students tend to burn things down. And so in the world of the IT directors, which is where we are, understand that this infrastructure is important to your researchers. Even if they constitute the very, very smallest amount of use of this, it is key to what they're doing. And the pandemic really, really drove that home for the entire trust and identity community. Because at the start of COVID, the number of research collaborations that spun up specifically to deal with COVID very rapidly was enormous. And the role of trust and identity in helping them spin up rapidly in that response was key. And so my plea to the IT directors is this is important to your researchers, more than anybody else in your institution.
Sure. One quick one. You talked about the usage around commercial interests. To what extent is the like national governments that also want to offer services specifically to students, are they willing to pay for some of this work that you do? Are you actually speaking to them and convincing them to take advantage of some of the services?
So yes, and kind of the African Open Science Cloud, and specifically the South African portion of that is an example of that. There is an understanding, in particular elements of our government, that this stuff is critical. Within our Department of Science and Innovation, there is an understanding that this is critical infrastructure that we're building here, and so there is a willingness. In terms of the question about paying, the way we structure our federation model, and it's a relatively common but not universal one, is that we never charge a service for participation in the federation. We derive all of the income for running the federation from the identity providers, and that's a key strategic decision, specifically because the value of federation is in having services, and so the more services we can convince to join and the lower the barriers of entry, the better. And that's partly where the controversy around the commercial student verifications come in, because there are kind of exception to that we don't want to charge services. Like if the government wants to build, in fact is building, things like student funding portals, and they want to leverage on the federated identity for that, we absolutely want them on board, and we absolutely don't want to charge them for that. So the kind of commercial world is a little bit different, but we do have some partnerships with the government, and they are increasingly starting to see this as critical infrastructure for research and innovation.
Thank you so much. We had one more question from Paul. Paul, please be kind of brief so that we finish the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, okay, for your awesome presentation. Mine is about sharing info. It's like there is a phobia when these, let's say, other federations are coming on board and you're to relate with them. That, okay, you say yes, but then which kind of mechanisms, policy-wise, do you follow, especially in regards to NDA or non-disclosure agreements and all that? Do you consider that? And secondly, is there a way you are linked on to GSUT in case, like for example, you find most of the institutions and students using GSUT to access some of the platforms. Thank you so much.
So the federation in itself doesn't really contain any proprietary information. And so we don't have NDAs at all. I'm not aware of any federation that does. What we do care a lot about is privacy, and Klaas touched on that. And what we do, so we have strong privacy legislation in South Africa, somewhat similar to the European GDPR legislation. And that is a negotiation with every service provider, not about the federation and the way it works or participation in the federation, but specifically about what attributes we will release to you. And that is a case-by-case basis, and that's a big part of the operational cost for me in running a federation is negotiating those attribute releases. In terms of collaboration, there is a global interfederation called EduGain, which we participate in, which brings thousands of services into what we do, far more than we have in our own. And Renu is part of that, and that's a key part in making the research environment and student services work.
Thank you so much, class. Okay, there are more questions, but in case you have any question, please find someone is laughing at me because I called you class instead of Guy. Sorry for that. Find Guy around. He's going to be around till on Monday. Yes. So feel free to interact with him. We are going to have tea. Thank you so much. From here, we are going to have tea, and I'll hand over the session to the next coordinator. But also, you're encouraged to visit the sponsors' booths in the corners. You'll see them. Thank you so much. Yes, tea is 15 minutes, please. So let's move and have tea in time so that other sessions get attention also. Thank you.
The research and education institutions in Eastern and Southern Africa and the world over, including the Americas. Are you an institution registered in Uganda to carry out research or offer education services? The Renu network is here for you. With over 150 campuses connected countrywide, the Renu network provides the best highway digital collaborations between your institution and the other research and education institutions in Uganda. All Uganda's accredited universities, research sites, hospitals, schools, and affiliated institutions. Through the regional network of the Ubuntu Net Alliance, the Renu network is also the best highway for connecting your institution to other research and education institutions in Eastern and Southern Africa and the world over, including the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Once on the Renu network, the data traffic exchange between your institution and other institutions or campuses connected to the Renu network is extremely fast and is neither billed nor capped. In other words, sharing of data among all institutions connected to the Renu network is completely free and unlimited. With this unlimited and fast transfer of data, there are very many possibilities for your institution, ranging from shared lectures and classrooms to shared libraries and other collaborative services. If you have more than one campus connected to the Renu network, we provide dedicated leased line services for you to extend your local area network across the various campuses at no cost. So, don't let your institution miss out on the collaboration that is transforming education and research in Uganda. For more information on Renu connectivity services, please contact the Renu Secretariat.
Hi, my name is Ken Stover. I'm the Group Managing Director and CEO of Simplify Networks. We started Simplify Networks in 2014 to be one of the leading providers of communications and networking equipment across East and Central Africa. We are master distributors for all the products that we sell, and that allows us then to buy directly from all of our manufacturers. That gives us the best support, best product mix, the best prices, and the training that we can give to all of our customers. We have products such as Ubiquiti, MikroTik, Sopto Fiber, and soon we'll be introducing the Leva products of tablets and small form factor computers. Thank you.
Have you ever wondered how you conduct business online? Make that call to a friend. Watch TV with family. And even check in on your security, all in a blink of an eye. Soliton Telmec is one of the reasons this is possible. We are the #1 network telecommunication engineering company in East Africa. Telecom network planning and design, telecom tools and equipment, network deployment, mass construction.
We are the leading providers of fiber optic networks,
Making life better by staying connected. Soliton Telmec, building networks for life.
Thinking of an offsite data backup plan? Struggling with data corruption due to unstable power and lack of proper cooling? Are your server room electricity bills becoming unbearable? Or are you limited by your server room's physical space? Colocation is the answer. But what is colocation? Colocation is a service at Renu that allows you to rent space in any of Renu's data centers for your servers and other computing hardware at very affordable rates. This hardware could be used for safe storage, offsite backup, or any other desired solution. Our data centers are highly secure, have extremely high availability for both electricity and network access, and also have world-class cooling. Once your servers are in our data centers, you can access them remotely at any time and from anywhere, and you will be guaranteed that your servers will never go offline. Also, as a member of Renu, you have unlimited bandwidth for uploads and downloads between the Renu data centers and your campus. Additionally, because your campus and the Renu data centers are all connected to the Renu network, it takes at most 2 milliseconds for a data packet to move from your campus to the Renu data centers. In other words, file transfer between your campus and the Renu data centers happens extremely fast. So, get offsite backup without spending your limited budget on building and maintaining new server rooms, and reduce your server room electricity bill with a solution that is guaranteed to keep your servers online. For more information on how to access this service, please contact the Renu Secretariat.
Are you an institution registered in Uganda to carry out research or offer education services? The Renu network is here for you. With over 150 campuses connected countrywide, the Renu network provides the best highway for digital collaborations between your institution and other research and educational institutions in Uganda. All Uganda's accredited universities, research sites, hospitals, schools, and affiliated institutions. Through the regional network of the Continental Net Alliance, the Renu network is also the best highway for connecting your institution to other research and education institutions in Eastern and Southern Africa and the world over, including the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Once on the Renu network, the data traffic exchange institution, ranging from shared lectures and classrooms to shared libraries and other collaborative services. If you have more than one campus connected to the Renu network, we provide dedicated leased line services for you to extend your local area network across the various campuses at no cost. So, don't let your institution miss out on the collaboration that is transforming education and research in Uganda. For more information on Renu connectivity services, please contact the Renu Secretariat.
Hi, my name is Ken Stover. I'm the Group Managing Director and CEO of Simplify Networks. We started Simplify Networks in 2014 to be one of the leading providers of communications and networking equipment across East and Central Africa. We are master distributors for all the products that we sell, and that allows us then to buy directly from all of our manufacturers. That gives us the best support, best product mix, the best prices, and the training that we can give to all of our customers. We have products such as Ubiquiti, MikroTik, Sopto Fiber, and soon we'll be introducing the Leva products of tablets and small form factor computers. Thank you.
Have you ever wondered how you conduct business online? Make that call to a friend. Watch TV with family. And even check in on your security. All in a blink of an eye. Soliton Telmec is one of the reasons this is possible. We are the #1 network telecommunication engineering company in East Africa. Telecom network planning and design, telecom tools and equipment, network deployment, mast construction.
We are the leading providers of fiber optic networks,
making life better by staying connected. Soliton Telmec, building networks for life.
Thinking of an off-site data backup plan? Struggling with data corruption due to unstable power and lack of proper cooling? Are your server room electricity bills becoming unbearable? Or are you limited by your server room's physical space? Colocation is the answer. But what is colocation? Colocation is a service at Renu that allows you to rent space in any of Renu's data centers for your servers and other computing hardware at very affordable rates. This hardware could be used for safe storage, offsite backup, or any other desired solution. Our data centers are highly secure, have extremely high availability for both electricity and network access, and also have world-class cooling. Once your servers are in our data centers, you can access them remotely at any time and from anywhere, and you will be guaranteed that your servers will never go offline. Also, as a member of Renu, you have unlimited bandwidth for uploads and downloads between the Renu data centers and your campus. Additionally, because your campus and the Renu data centers are all connected to the Renu network, it takes at most 2 milliseconds for a data packet to move from your campus to the Renu data centers. In other words, file transfer between your campus and the Renu data centers happens extremely fast. So, get off-site backup without spending your limited budget on building and maintaining new server rooms, and reduce your server room electricity bill with a solution that is guaranteed to keep your servers online. For more information on how to access this service, please contact the Renu
The problem is enormous. Right now, on a worldwide basis, over 5 billion people do not have access to simple surgical operations. If we look at the magnitude of the problem, 17 million people would be expected to die from problems that could be corrected with a surgical intervention. The Chibirwa Surgical Center in eastern Uganda is a sustainable program that we can provide affordable, safe surgery to everyone. Our program has always been around looking for ways to create not only surgical care in a region, but a sustainable program of surgical care. It is unlikely to be solved by exporting or importing surgeons into regions of need, but finding more efficient ways to use technology to share surgical knowledge. Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 have been game changers.
We've been able to start practicing telesurgery, where I can invite the assistance of an expert from any part of the world.
The Dynamics 365 with Remote Assist, coupled with the HoloLens technology, allows us to have surgeons operating with Uganda completely connected with surgeons here in Mount Sinai.
Through this HoloLens, Dr. Marin is able to see exactly what I am seeing. He's able to have a real-time view of my surgical field, 7,000 miles away.
This young girl who comes in with a significant problem that isn't commonly encountered in this community is something we see here at Mount Sinai multiple times on a weekly basis. What was your plan in terms of incisions?
So my initial plan was to make an elliptical incision.
Sometimes it's actually helpful to do a circular incision. I'm just going to trace out for you what I'm thinking.
It was so clear now how I would have approached it would not have offered me the advantage.
So the ability to evolve in the technology and share our knowledge with our Ugandan partners allows the Ugandan team to evolve as well. Their nurses, their anesthesiologists, their surgeons all get confident, get capable of doing things. If we think about it in the simplest form, consultative surgical support can begin with a telephone. A simple landline telephone can communicate between one doctor and another. Cell phones lead to video conferences, lead to team-based educational programs, all the way up to the Dynamic 365 technology with HoloLens support, where we have physicians in an operating room dynamically operating and sharing what they see, what they hear, and describing what they feel with a physician, a surgeon, over thousands of miles away. We can go all the way on to the end of the spectrum, which can include the use of robotically assisted surgical procedures, where a surgeon could be at a console here in New York, operating together with a Ugandan surgeon in the middle of eastern Uganda. And there are certainly going to be technologies that transcend our robotic knowledge that'll go beyond that to be developed in the future. I readily see how we're going to begin to integrate this into our residency and surgical training programs in this institution, where we can begin to advance independent surgical skills with our surgical trainees on a more rapid basis. This will form a very important part of the next generation of education of surgeons. The ability to do something that can be scaled much farther beyond an individual's technical skills and take it from one person to 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people trained to do the things that I know how to do and I'm capable of doing is one of the most exciting things I've experienced in my professional life.
Carry out research or offer education services? The Renu Network is here for you. With over 150 campuses connected countrywide, the Renu Network provides the best highway for digital collaborations between your institution and the other research and education institutions in Uganda. All Uganda's accredited universities, research sites, hospitals, schools, and affiliated institutions. Through the regional network of the Ubuntu Net Alliance, the Renu network is also the best highway for connecting your institution to other research and education institutions in Eastern and Southern Africa and the world over, including the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Once on the Renu network, the data traffic exchange between your institution and other institutions or campuses connected to the Renu network is extremely fast and is neither billed nor capped. In other words, sharing of data among all institutions connected to the Renu network is completely free and unlimited. With this unlimited and fast transfer of data, there are very many possibilities for your institution, ranging from shared lectures and classrooms to shared libraries and other collaborative services. If you have more than one campus connected to the Renu network, we provide dedicated leased line services for you to extend your local area network across the various campuses at no cost. So, don't let your institution miss out on the collaboration that is transforming education and research in Uganda. For more information on Renu connectivity services, please contact the Renu Secretariat.
Hi, my name is Ken Stover. I'm the Group Managing Director and CEO of Simplify Networks. We started Simplify Networks in 2014 to be one of the leading providers of communications and networking equipment across East and Central Africa. We are master distributors for all the products that we sell, and that allows us then to buy directly from all of our manufacturers. That gives us the best support, best product mix, the best prices, and the training that we can give to all of our customers. We have products such as Ubiquiti, MikroTik, Sopto Fiber, and soon we'll be introducing the Leva products of tablets and small form factor computers. Thank you.
Colleagues, can I request for your attention?
Have you ever wondered how you conduct business?
Can I request for your attention? Can everyone come to their seats, please? We are behind schedule by about an hour. Helen, kindly request colleagues can come in with their teas. Those who would like more tea can always go back, get tea or eat. So everyone should get seated. Robert Mujabi, please get seated. Brian, can you please remind the people who are out there to come in, just to come in with their tea or water or whatever they have. Louis, can you please tell the rest of the people on this side to come in? Those who are still taking tea, they should come in and have their tea from inside here. Oh, great. So the chair for the next session is Mr. Perez Masiko. could you please come over and take us through the next session? Thank you.
Thank you, Reid. Good morning once again. Perez Masco is my name. I'm going to be the session chair, and we are quite behind the schedule, but we are going to try to be as fast as we can. So our next presenter is Grass. Grass is the co-author of Building the Mobile Internet, Cisco Press 2011, and Wireless Networking in Developing World 2013, as well as 3 RFCs. Grass holds 5 US patents, and Grass in 2012 was the recipient of the first Joint Community Award for creating EDROM. Grass has served as the chair of the Joint Task Force on Mobility for more than 10 years, as the chair of IETF, for a working group, as a member of IETF Security Directorate, and as a TNC Program Committee member and the chair. Grass in September 2019 also was inducted into the Internet Hall of Fame in recognition of his invention of EDROM. That is the Global Research and Education Wi-Fi Roaming Service. So let's welcome Grass, give us a presentation. Grass, you're welcome.
Yes. Good morning still. Yes, just about. I want to start with thanking Renu for inviting me. It's really great to be here. The hospitality was awesome in the past couple of days. So thank you very much for that. I also want to recognize the fact that Renu is doing such a great job here, and that is one of the reasons why I said yes when I was invited. I've seen so many great things happening here, and I think you guys need to be proud of the organization, Renu, and as previous speakers had, keep pushing them to go even beyond where they are now. I am CITO of Géant, so I'm responsible for all the services above the network. I'm also in the board of Get EduRoam, EduVPN. I'm chair of the board of Seamless Access, but I think the real reason why I'm here is that 20 years ago I had, almost to the day, 20 years ago, I had one good idea. Some evil people say never had any good idea since, but I hope they're wrong. What I want to do is take you through some of the things I have seen in my lifetime and working in the IT sector. And even though we didn't coordinate this, I want to echo the statement that Nicholas made about learning from the history. I think we can learn some valuable lessons from history, and I hope I can share those lessons with you, and I hope that can guide you in inventing the future, because that is really what we're doing here, I think. Of course, I will talk about EduRoam, a little bit about the history, but I mostly, in the end, want to look to the future, and I think that future is bright, and I think Renu is part of that bright future. So let me start with a little bit of a history lesson. We're now talking about end of the 60s. There was this network created for ARPANET, the defense ministry in the US. And this was the time of the Cold War. I remember well, this is before I remember, but I remember as a kid that guys that had to do their military service, they would be going to the Lüneburger Heide, to the east of Germany, because the Russians were coming. We didn't know when, but they would be coming. So at the same time, also in the US, they were convinced at some point there would be a nuclear war. So the defense secretary said, develop a network that if, let's say, the east coast of the US gets bombed, that the west coast will still operate. And that's what they did. They developed a network that was not circuit-based, that was what we now call packet-based, and that allowed for a part of the network, or even large part of the network, to go down without affecting the rest. And to the top right, you see one of the initial 4 hosts on the internet. To the left, you see the Pentagon host on the internet, and to the right, the digital one. But what I think is important to see is that from that very small start, it went very quickly in the course of a couple of years to spread across the US. The other thing that you might notice if you look at the abbreviations and you recognize the names is that they're all research and education institutions. They're research institutions or universities. So back in the days, the internet was the research and education internet. The other thing to notice at that picture to the right is that they were branching out to outside the US. There was a satellite link with Norway, and from Norway to London. And this is really what I think is the start of the global internet. And if you then look at the picture in the bottom, at the moment, there are a lot of countries that have an internet penetration of well above 80%. In the Netherlands, we are at 98% or so. Or maybe I should say also that I'm not from South Africa, counter to what the honorary guest said. I'm from the Netherlands. I do admit we have some checkered history with South Africa and gave the world one of the ugliest words that exist, apartheid. But my story is going to be about togetherness rather than apartheid. So it took off. And if you look at that picture, you see there's still a lot to win. And I will not keep on praising Renu, but this is a region where there is still a lot to win in bringing the internet to large parts of the population. Funny enough, something else came up after a while. And this was an important moment for 2 reasons. One is a new technology was developed that changed the way we were using the internet. But what it also did, it removed the internet from the research and education space to the world. Everybody was starting to use the internet, and to the point that for many people, the internet and the web are synonymous. I tell that anecdote more often, but at some point my mother sent me an email saying that the internet was down. And I said, but how can you send me an email if the internet is down? No, she said, email works, the internet is down. And I think that is for many people the case. Many people, I think those things are the same. So it brought a research and education network that would be taken over by all those fantastic networks that were devised by the ITU and ISO, etc. Out of the playground into the real world. And well, as you can see, what a newspaper in the year 2000 said that this internet thing would be over pretty soon. didn't really come true. So why do I say something about that? Well, for two reasons. One is I had made a really nice presentation because, well, if you know Helen, you will know how persuasive she can be. I had that, of course, ready 2 weeks ago. Usually I do it on the last day, but she kept pushing. And then just before I was taking off for Uganda, I said, oh, by the way, it would be really nice if you could also say something about the theme of the conference. As a matter of fact, that was very easy, because I realized that when I looked at my slides, that was precisely what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about partnerships. I used the term, it takes a village to raise a child. Maybe I should use here the word Ubuntu as well. This is something we do together. And you heard Guy present, you see all the things that Renu are doing. This is not a few people that make this work. We do this all together. And moreover, we are not each other's competitors. When you look at the commercial world, then you compete with the other organizations. We help each other because it's to our benefit if other NRENs are doing well, if other universities are doing well. So very much in agreement that partnerships are very important. The word prospects also kind of naturally came up in my presentation because a lot is about taking opportunities and being at the right time at the right place. But at the same time, you need to make sure that you're prepared when the right time arrives. If you then start thinking about taking advantage of opportunities, you're probably too late. So you need to build an infrastructure together that allows you to move when the time is right. And the last one that I had already in my slides was what this term called permissionless innovation. That is the notion that you don't need some authority, a telecom operator, a government, whatever, to give you permission to develop something. And if you look back at what I just showed about the internet and the web, then those are really good examples of that. The original internet had never thought about 400 gig Ethernet connections. But it was an architecture that allowed for what is generally summarized in one sentence, IP over everything, everything over IP. It allowed for multiple carriers of information, and it allowed for many applications to be built on top of that, regardless of the underlying network technology. And that is why Tim Berners-Lee, when he sat in his lab at CERN and he was thinking about hypertext, could just build the first browser and the first web server. Nobody could tell him, you're not allowed to do that. Don't do this crazy stuff with hypertext. He just did it. And if you look at the internet today, it's full of examples of where people had an idea and they made it into reality, and some of them got filthy rich over it, but arguably it has enriched our lives to have the likes of Google around. But when I started to think about this, I thought there is one thing that is missing here, and that I think, in my experience, is very important. And that is simplicity. I think we have a habit of building very complex systems, and 2 weeks ago I read this quote on the bottom that very much resonated with me, and that says, start simple and build on top of that. And yes, you may end up with a complex system. If you look at the internet itself, if you look at the main protocols that we're using at the internet, the lightweight directory access protocol, LDAP, there's not much lightweight about it, I can tell you. DNS started with a host file, just a list of IP addresses and names, and with DNS and then DNSSEC, etc., it became a very complicated system. But it increased in complexity as there was a need. Instead of a committee getting together and trying to think what we would need in 10 years' time. I think that is where the OSI model went completely wrong. Looking back, they had a lot of things right, but the time was not right for it, so people didn't go there. If you now look at LDAP version 3 and compare it to the directory access protocol that was created by ISO, they're not that different anymore, but it failed. And so if you start big, it will fail. If you start small and build on top of it, your chances of success are much higher. So, now trying to look a little bit at these learning moments in the context of EduRoam. I'll let it roll till at least Uganda is blue. A little bit of history, and also to kind of reinforce the point that there is a lot of luck involved. Back in the days, I was working at SurfNet, the Dutch research network, and what we were seeing is that there was an increasing need of connectivity everywhere. So we came up with this picture. It's a picture from 2003. The activity started, I think, around 2000, 2001 perhaps, and we basically said, there is the SurfNet network, and wherever we are, whatever technology we are using, we should be able to get to the network. And back in those days, you would have these crazy things like PCM CIA cards that you would slot into your laptop and then pray that it would work. Because, of course, you didn't have the driver for it, so you still couldn't get access. So you needed first to get access to download the driver to get access. You kind of get the problem, I think. Also, by pure coincidence, I'm also using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but then in a more characterial, well, I'll break my tongue over that. In a funny way, it's all good and well, food, shelter, self-expression, etc. But what we really need is Wi-Fi. And that was kind of what led to EduRoam. So what had happened in the context of these access pilots, where we would be experimenting with GPRS and fiber to student houses, etc., we came into we came to the idea to combine a number of technologies that we were already using. We had a radius-based dial-up infrastructure, so you could, with your modem, get connected to the SurfNet network, and we were experimenting with a very new technology at that point, 802.1x, an IEEE standard that for port-based access that allowed you to, based on the identity of the user, put them in a certain VLAN or network. And we were using that for the student houses, because the student houses, hostels they are called here, I think, would have students from different universities, and we wanted to somehow split that out so that they could get to their own university. Complete failure. 802.1x was absolutely not ready for prime time for that use case. But thinking about it, I did think, but actually this is kind of cool because we have a radius proxy infrastructure that allows you to bring identities to wherever you want to bring it. And we have a method of also gaining access to Wi-Fi access points. It was not only for wired, and in fact, I still think that 20 years down the road, 802.1x is still not very well suited for wired access control. So we've just tried a little bit out. I had the gentleman to the right, Paul Dekkers, came as a student to me, and he was looking for a graduation thesis, and he asked if I had an ID. I said, well, yes, I do have an ID, and I could use with someone that spends a few months on trying to really kick it into motion. And that kind of seemed to work. Not in the way that we had intended it, I'll be honest with you, because roaming, nobody was thinking about inter-institutional roaming. People were thinking about their own campus, And as it happened, one of the campuses in the Netherlands, Twente University of Technology, was struggling with that students from different faculties could not get access to the network at another faculty. But they did take classes at that faculty. So they essentially asked, would this also work inside our institution? And of course, I bluffed and said, sure. And then they wanted to have a big wireless campus, and they were going to do a procurement. And they said, would that also work in that environment? And again, I said, yeah, sure. And hoping that I was right and would not be laden with tar and feathers and kicked out of the city. But actually it did work quite okay. There were at the time, I think, only 2 vendors that could support 802.1x. I think Cisco and Aruba were the only ones. And in fact, another vendor filed a lawsuit against the University of Twente to say that their tender conditions were not fair, but that was dismissed because we were talking about an IEEE standard. How can you go wrong if you request an IEEE standard? So that all went well, and then I thought, let me see if I can get others to use the same, and I wrote a pretty small email to the mobility list of Terena, one of the predecessors of Géant, and saying, hey, we have been experimenting with this, would this be something to do? And that led to what is now called EduRoam. At the time, it was also not called EduRoam. One thing we did, and I think this is also quite important, we didn't immediately put on our blinds and ran in one direction. We did trial actually 2 other alternative technologies as well. We looked at web-based access, so web captive portals, etc. We looked at using a VPN way of connecting, but the problem is it's impossible to get a web captive portal really secure, not for all devices at least. And for VPNs, we would kind of have to open all the IP addresses of the world to connect to the VPN, and that kind of defeated the purpose. So what won was this 802.1x plus radius-based technology. And well, this slide I've probably shown about 1,000 times at least. This was the original EduRoam slide. And 20 years down the road, little has changed. There are some changes, but in terms of the trust setup, this is how it works. What happens is a user that tries to get access tells the access point, I would like to get access, and by the way, here are my credentials, but those credentials are encrypted. The access point of the visited institution checks what realm the user belongs to, and in this case, the radio server of University A will basically decide, is this a request coming from someone from University A.nl, yes or no? And in the case it is no, it will proxy the request to someone that might know more about. So University A doesn't have to know anything about all the stuff that is behind there, doesn't have to know today that there are, 6,000 IDPs that they potentially can talk to. They only have to know, if I don't know what to do with it, I know where to send it. So let's assume that this is someone from University B. The central radio server at SurfNet needs to know about all the realms, all the domain parts of its members, and be able to forward it to the right server. That radio server does, in fact, do the same thing that the institutional one does. Is it one of my guys? So is it something that ends with .nl? Then I find the right server in my country. If not, I send it to someone that may know more about it. And this is, in our case, was the European top-level server that we created. But let's assume this is not a Dutch student from University B. I know where to find that radio server. I forward the request. And that server looks at its user database, verifies the username, password, or whatever other means of authenticating you use, and sends back, yes, I validated the username and password, or no, it's not correct, travels along the same hierarchy, and Guy said Eduroam is just yes or no, you can get access. It's tiny bit more than that, and that is you can also do a little bit of policy and more like an authorization decision. You can decide in what VLAN you want to put a user based on their identity. So you can choose to say, oh, well, this is someone from my finance department. I put them on the finance department VLAN. Or these are guests and I don't want them to create trouble at my university. I put them immediately on a VLAN that gives access to the internet. The one thing that is very important is that line on top, the secure Ict tunnel. Ict, the Extensible Authentication Protocol, is a way of making sure that only the supplicant in 802.1x terms, the device that the user uses, and the home server can see what the username and password are. And that means that while Radius is actually a pretty insecure protocol, that doesn't really matter, because we make sure that there's a secure tunnel all the way to your home institution. And the worst that can happen is, because of the insecurities in the Radius protocol, is that you get, let's say, a denial of service. There is somebody that pretends to be part of Eduroam, but if you do your configuration well, you will never send your username and password to that entity. So, as I said, in this case, I put it into a VLAN that gives access to the internet, and this is pretty much what Eduroam is all about. All the rest, and I will say some more things about Eduroam, but if you know this about Eduroam, you understand Eduroam. And if you don't understand, come to me in the break, and I'm happy to talk for days in a row about it. My flight is on Saturday evening at 11:30, so it has to be before that. But I think there are a couple of other things here worth mentioning. And I mentioned it before, the word partnerships. This is not, I had the original idea. I'm happy to take credit for that. I don't do false modesty. It was my idea, but it would never have gotten anywhere if it was just me. There is, in fact, a global Eduroam community that consists of hundreds of people that really care about the stuff and do these things. Brian, Helen here at Renu, they do as much, if not more, about furthering Eduroam than I do. And I think that is important. It is important that we like that from each other that they have success. And that is how we can improve and get better and better. That is starting simple and getting more complex if there is a need. The needs of the Dutch NREN SurfNet are different from the needs of Tenet in South Africa or Renu in Uganda. And I think we need to recognize that, and we need to make sure that we bring all those needs in. In the beginning, in the early days, it was a European thing. And as you see, we had a lot of fun. We started with drinking beer together. It got more serious over time, so we drank a lot of coffee to stay awake, etc. But we pulled it off, because what you see there is the Portuguese guy, a Danish guy, two Finnish guys, and we trusted each other, and we made it work. And that is the other important thing I want to emphasize here. I have a lot of negative things to say about Stephen Covey and his 7 habits of leadership, or whatever the book is called. But this thing, I think he's spot on. Trust is the key for our collaboration. That is what built Eduroam. Not the technology, not individual people. It is the fact that we trusted each other and that we made it work. And I think that is what sets the NREN community apart from the rest of the world, pretty much. So, 10 years down the road, it got serious. there were buses with EduRoam. The Japanese created their own EduRoam logo that in the end never took on, but I still think it's a really cute one. But it became a global thing. And 10 years down the road, we celebrated that it had gotten serious. We had a global EduRoam governance committee that had representatives from all of the regions in the world. Equal representation is very important. EduRoam is not something from Géant. EduRoam is something from all of us. And we need to make sure that even though the start was in Europe, and as you can see already in 2012, still 43 of the 52 or 3 countries were European countries. Luckily, that's not the case any longer, but we wanted to make sure that we really made this a global initiative, and that is one thing I am very proud of, that we managed to do that. EduRoam became the 27th most used SSID in the world. We were very impressed with that at the time. At the moment, we are 11. We have been number 10 also for a bit. So this is not just a toy thing in education anymore. This is one of the most recognized brands, if you want, in the world. And we did that together. So it grew. We got to 1 billion international roaming activities, to 1 billion a month total authentications, and we turned it into an RFC that, well, if you have worked in the IETF, you will know it takes years and years to get something standardized. So it was not until 2015 that we finally got our RFC published, but it's recognized as an architecture that is worth documenting in the standards body. This is a little bit an old statistic, but I like to show it because it shows also that you don't always control everything. If you look at both the national authentications for EduRoam and the international authentications, you will see the dark blue is the latest. You will see there is a steady growth in both. It varies a bit over the months of the year. September is typically a month when it is really busy because that's when the new students start university. But you also see that something happened somewhere in 2020. All of a sudden, we went from a continuously going up trajectory to close to zero. And that's when COVID hit. If you would look at a similar graph from Identity Federation access, the stuff that Guy was talking about, you see the opposite. All of a sudden, people wanted from home have access to all of the services they used to have access to at the university. Nobody traveled anymore, so there was no need for roaming access anymore. I did check, and at the moment we are pretty much back on track to keep increasing, but for a couple of years EduRoam was very low, with a few exceptions. And this is again where I would say this is where the community kicks in, where I had never thought about, others had thought about. So South Africa already before COVID, but what really took off, bringing EduRoam to libraries in townships, etc. People, students that normally would not have access to an internet connection could get access and could continue their studies, and thus it did miracles to bridge the digital divide. And that is something that I think is super. And if you now look at Renu with the Metro EduRoam, same story. It brings access to those that would otherwise not have easy access. And I think that's super. I think these are the things that speaking personally, make me happy. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It is a group thing. I just browsed my own hard disk for pictures of events that were EduRoam related, people that were very much involved in developing Eduroam. As you can see, we also have fun together. It's not only hard work. And this is what is Eduroam. Eduroam is all of those people and many more. So looking a little bit at the future, I showed you the model of Eduroam, and it does get a little bit more complex because we were kind of unhappy with the fact that the radius is insecure. So we thought it's probably good to put TLS on those links between radius servers. So we developed this thing called TLS encryption for radius, also known as RADSEC. And then we discovered something else. Once you have certificates at both ends of the connection, you actually can do fun things, because you don't need to use the whole hierarchy. You can just verify if a certificate is valid in your PKI. So we can now do direct connections also between radius server. But as I said in the beginning, that doesn't change anything to the fundamental trust model of it. University A trusts that somebody that proves that he is from University B can get access, because we are a community. And if one of our community says, you can trust this person, we will accept that. And of course, we have all kinds of measures around it if that trust is abused, but that is the key tenet of Eduroam. If you say that this is an okay person, I will believe that. And in fact, the stuff that Guy was talking about has the exact same trust model. If the IDP says this is a student from this university and he has the following characteristics, I give him access. So much more. In the interest of time, I will not spend too much time on that, but I'll summarize with saying there are two fundamental things that we keep on trying to improve on. One is make it easier for users to use Eduroam, and the other is make sure that there are more and more places where you can do Eduroam. The later one, the open roaming initiatives, is essentially Eduroam for the rest of us. It's where industry took the Eduroam model and applied that for the broader world. And while there are some threats in that I'm happy to talk about offline, it does have the promise of a massively improved footprint of Eduroam. All of a sudden, companies, public services, etc., can offer access to Eduroam users. And the other one is things like CAT, the Eduroam installer, things like Get Eduroam that Guy was talking about, Eduroam visitor access, all kinds of things to make it easier for end users to get an Eduroam account and for universities to roll out secure configurations, etc. So that leads me to the last bit of my talk, and that is Renu. And I said this before a couple of times, and I will probably say it a few more times, apart from the fact that I have to compliment the marketing team of Renu for doing a fantastic job. Not only do they communicate that Renu is doing a fantastic job, it's also showing what you're doing, and people are paying attention to this. I get people asking me, hey, did you see what those Renu people did? Or did you listen to Helen's talk at TNC? And I think this shows that we have grown beyond the stage that you copy what we're doing. Because you started with doing the things that we had been doing, you can now bring us to the next step. Guy was saying that he had been thinking about something like Metro Eduroam and missed some pieces, and now you guys did it. I was talking to Hideaki Goto, the Japanese Eduroam expert, about some access points that he was using, and he said, oh, you're in Uganda. Oh, I'm a bit jealous. They are doing what I wanted to do for many years and didn't really manage. So I have to congratulate you with that. And as I was saying, the world is taking, paying attention to what is happening here. I think like this Twitter conversation, etc., that's just fantastic. That's really creative use of social media to bring things across. I wish I would have thought about this, but I guess I'm too old to think of using Twitter for these things. And also, it's not only that you do things, but it's all, as I said, the world is paying attention to that. This is Helen presenting at the APAN conference, the Asian Pacific conference. Well, the order is not in geographically, but I'll finish with our own conference, TNC, where, as you can see, she had a bit of a problem. She was standing in front of the exit, so she couldn't get in. But once she discovered that that sign means you cannot enter, she did manage to present. And as I said, people were really in the break coming to me and asking me if I had seen the presentation and what I thought of it. And having worked for 13 years, having worked for 13 years at an NREN, SurfNet, I cannot really say, yes, they are the greatest NREN, but I do want to say you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I once again want to congratulate you with that, and thank you for having me here.
Another round of applause for Kras. Yeah, for the interest of time, we are going to have 3 questions for Kras, and then we shall go to the next presentation. So the first 3, Waiswa, someone with a mic, Brian, Ben, yeah, Waiswa.
My name is Wilson from Mobunet Alliance. Thank you, class, for that interesting keynote that you provided. Thinking about your opening slides where you talked about the history of the internet, it got me thinking about the likes of Yakov Rector, Leo Bosak, the founder of Cisco. Yakov, I think, was working with IBM at the time when he linked up with Leo Bosak to, start writing RFCs on BGP and so on. So my question in that line is, these people are coming from a research background, and their contribution as far is really felt in the industry right now. We are using Juniper gear, we are using Cisco equipment. So my question really is, how can we, as players in the research and education ecosystem, encourage such research and have, solutions at the end of the day that we are seeing coming from the likes of Giant? What examples can we borrow from Giant and implement here in Africa at the regional level and also at an NREN level, to see that our researchers, our contributors in the networking infrastructure can have solutions that are useful at the academic scene? Thanks.
Yes. So I thought it was not that warm today. That was before I was for half an hour under these lamps. I think the word partnership also applies here. If I gave the impression that I don't like industry, that is wrong. I think industry has a different driver, but we need industry, and we need to work with industry, and we do that. But we don't sell our soul to the industry, and I think that is, for me, the balance that we try to achieve. So yes, we work with Google, we work with Microsoft, we work with, on the network, in the network area, with the likes of Cisco, Juniper, and all these others. We need to make sure that we do that on our own terms. We know that the driver for a commercial company is creating revenue. we also know that the driver for us is to deliver the best possible experience to our community, the students and researchers. And as long as you know that, and as long as you are aware of what you're doing, there is no problem. So if we discuss with Microsoft, we say, we happily use some of the fantastic stuff that you're doing, but we don't want to use your global directory for the Where Are You From service. We have our own Where Are You From service that finds out to what university you belong to. And that is kind of the way I see it. When I was long ago at SurfNet, we would have a very good relationship with Cisco, and then especially with the research departments at Cisco. And we helped them ahead just as much as they helped us by providing us what was at the time the fastest network in the world. And that synergy and that partnership, I think what it is all about. But as I said, don't sell your soul. I think Brian just raised his hand so that you had to walk a lot.
Thank you. I just want to add something to what Klaas has just said to Wilson's question. One of the things that we can do, particularly as African universities, African NRENs, is participate more. In the role that I'm in, I participate in a lot of these things, and often I am the only representative of any African country in them. And that's really sad. We have a lot of good ideas in this country, in this continent, and we have very, very different constraints. And unless we participate, the world moves in a different direction. And so what I want to add to what Klaas has said is, get out there and participate. If your institutional library is doing something cool with ORCID or doing something cool with Federation, get out there and participate. Talk about it, get involved in the standardization. It's critical that we get more African players in that space.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, whenever we have EduRoam meetings, Guy waves his phones that are used in South Africa just to keep reminding us of the fact that not everybody has an iPhone 13 and that we need to make sure that we serve all users. I also, you're not supposed to disagree with your host, so I would never disagree with something that Nicholas said, but otherwise I would say I'd like not to see this as Ubuntu.net is connecting to Géant and through that to the rest of the world. I like to think that we connect to each other. And we reach African countries through Ubuntu.net, East African countries. You reach European countries through us. And, well, we also provide transit, but that's what friends do, right?
The last one. Any other question? Okay, I think we are good to go. Thank you, Grass. Another hand clap for him. Yeah, we are going to listen to other presenters, and we are going to use another approach. We are going to listen to all the three next forum presentations. Then we note down our questions, our comments. Then we shall handle the questions after those three presentations. Before I invite the next person, I think the next presenter should find your way here. I would like to recognize the presence of Dr. Juliana Sansa Otim, who is also a board member of Renu. She's right there. You're welcome. Okay, the next presenter. Yes, you're welcome. Sorry, I left my, you can come on. Okay, let's welcome another presenter. She's right here. And we, as I said, we note down the questions, we shall combine them at once. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Nakaketo Claire Sharita, and I work with Renu in the systems department. So I'll be presenting about Metro Edirom. Next. Yes. Oh, thank you. All right, so I'll just give you the history of Edirom, specifically at Renu, not in general, because that has been given by class. Then I will talk about the details of Metro Edirom. So Edirom in general was introduced at Renu in January 2016. And so before it was introduced, the institutions could connect to their respective wireless networks through sharing passwords. And we saw that that was a bit hectic in that, say if an institution moved from Makerere and visited Nkumba University, they had to ask for a password, which is a bit so manual and hectic. So that is why we introduced Edirom, which helped eradicate all that process of always asking for passwords when you visit another institution. So class has already explained about how Edirom works and all that it requires your institutional email address as well as the password. So in that way, if you visit another institution, or even within your institution, all you have to do is use your email and password and you'll be hooked onto the network. So when we introduced Edirom, we had our first institution joining, and that was Uganda Christian University. And so from the time Edirom was introduced up to around September 2022, we had only 18 institutions join this service. So it was a good service, but it wasn't really picked up very well as we expected. So in September, that is in 2022, when we had that total lockdown, remember institutions were still paying for the bandwidth, but they were all at home. They were not using the bandwidth, except for the few that really asked for a disconnection at that time. So yes, they were home, they were paying for the bandwidth. So as Renu, we thought of how we could extend this network to closer to our institutional members. And the solution at the time that we got was Metro Edirom. So Metro Edirom is basically Edirom, but extended closer to where you are. It is deployed to, let's say, hotels, cafes, malls, restaurants, among others. So with Metro Edirom, what we did is to move Edirom away from the institutional boundaries. So initially, before Metro Edirom, Edirom was only within the institutions. So with that total lockdown, that became a bit restrictive. So Edirom was introduced, and it was introduced in September 2022. And this really helped to break the boundaries that, yes, we had the restriction of movement, but people could still get connected and work or do their research. So from the time Edirom was introduced, that was in September, up to date, we've had an increase in the Edirom, an increase in the number of institutions that are requesting for this service, and it has increased by approximately 54. So we've had more 54 institutions join the service, which is a really good sign, and that was because of Metro Edirom. Then initially when we introduced it, we had restrictions in the movement and all that, so we decided to first deploy it in the central region. That was basically Kampala, Entebbe, and Mukono. First, it was a test drive because we didn't know what will come out of it. But after monitoring and seeing the usability, we noticed that this could be a good service for our member institutions. So it was later deployed in the upcountry areas, that is around in January 2022. And across the country, we have approximately 488 hotspots, which are outside the institutions. So this is the initial setup, or it is the ideal setup of a drone in each institution, whereby each institution has a router, a core switch, and a number of other access switches. So we expect that maybe each institution have the access points which broadcast a drone connected to an access switch, and then they should also have a radius server which is helping with authentication. Then from the institution, we have a link to the Renu backbone, where we have our federation level radius. So that radius knows all the other radiuses in the country. That's what helps that helps in a way that if you go outside your institution, you will still be hooked onto the network. And then for the metro address setup, it's in a way that we have, say, a service provider A, which has all the access points connected in the different parts of the country. Then from that service provider, we have two VLANs that are passed on to our network. This means that whatever traffic we are using in the metro address still goes through the Renu network. So you're basically using our network on the metro address. So that we have two VLANs, one passing the authentications, user authentications, and then the other passing the user traffic. So when that traffic reaches our side, we have two servers, one being the radius proxy. So that just proxies all the requests that are coming from metro address onto our federation level radius. And then we also have the DHCP server, which gives out IP addresses. So we've been monitoring metro address just to see if people are taking on the service. And this graph just shows you the traffic breakdown of the different quarters ever since metro address was introduced up to this quarter. Just something to note in this graph is that from January 2022 up to date, there's been a really great increase in the traffic. And this is mainly because it was around January that we had the lockdown lifted and people were moving more often. And that's still around the time where we also extended metro address to the upcountry sites. Then it's still within that period that we extended address to also secondary school. So we've seen an increase in the traffic, as well as the number of users that are logging onto this service. So this graph just shows you the number of users that have successfully been connected to metro address, and these are in thousands. Still, we see that there's been a great increase from Jan to September this year. So here we have the top metro address users. So we really see that students and researchers, as well as the staff, are really enjoying this service. So we see MOOC being on the top with over 1,791,000 plus users, user logins. So all this just shows the total of logins from each institution. So we mentioned that in January to now, we've been able to extend metro address to even secondary schools. So you will notice that towards the bottom, we have some secondary schools also appearing on the top of the Metro Edrom users. That is Kansanga Seed, we have Heritage somewhere up there, and then Chambogo College. So, then we also have the top unique users. With unique users, we mean, say a user, Sinakaketo, has connected onto Edrom. What we collect, the system will collect me as a unique user, in that even if I left Munyonyo and went to Kansanga, I would still be counted as a unique user. So I'm uniquely identified in the system. So this graph just shows you the top unique users for every institution. Still, we have Moka, the top, UCU and Chambogo, but still, we notice that we have a number of secondary schools also appearing. So what have we achieved from Metro Edrom? So first of all, there's been an increase, as we've seen in the statistics. We've had an increase in the number of institutions that have taken up the service, which is a really good thing. And then our researchers and students and staff, they're able to get connected. So with Edrom, if I say, if it's my first time to connect and I connect from here, if I moved to the exit of, or if I moved to to Kansanga or any other place, I'll just get connected without re-entering my credentials. So people get connected easily wherever they go. And then there's also been an increase in the membership. So we've had more institutions join the network, mainly because of this service, because Metro Edrom is completely free. All the bandwidth that the users use is on Renu. Then we've had also an increase in the partnerships. We have had more people try to join us because they see that cause that we are on. And then there's also been a great distinction between the service provider and the NRENs. As the NRENs, we are non-profit makers, and we really look forward to enabling and increasing collaboration between the researchers and students and institutions, sorry. So with Metro Edrom, it's a totally free service, but you find that some internet service providers have closely the same service, but at a given price, but also the technology is a bit different. So that has really helped to see the distinction between the NREN and the internet service providers. So during this, the introduction of this service, HOPE has identified a number of challenges that maybe it could have been the reason as to why there was a low uptake. The database they're using, as well as the radius. So we've seen that this has been a challenge for most of the institutions in a way that they couldn't afford either having the servers or even acquiring the cloud space. And then also to set up Edrom, as Renu, we assist the institutions. We don't do all the work for them, but we assist them in the deployment. Also, the fact that we are using certain service providers, there's been a challenge that these hotspots are not